I'd also curious about creatine supplementation for women's health. Obviously, more than half or more of my audience are women, and there's been quite a bit of interesting research about creatine for women. I know there's a review by Smith Ryan that came out, and there's also been some research done on women during menopause and how creatine might help with that group. Any thoughts on creatine for women's physiology?
So Abby Smith Ryan is the best in the world on that particular topic. So I do read that research as well. And yeah, there's definitely some evidence that creatine is an effective supplement for both menopausal females and postmenopausal females as well. So yeah, creatine, it does work. There's actually some pretty cool studies done in the 1990s where they actually took muscle biopsies between males and females. They actually showed that females had higher resting values of creatine before supplementation. So that is interesting because that basically shows that they might have a little bit different metabolism and responsiveness to creatine supplementation. And what we know is that females might be a little bit less responsive to creatine compared to males. That's based off of a few studies, and yeah, so it definitely needs to be explored further. Abby Smith Ryan also showed that across the menstrual cycle, it could vary as well. So estrogen, for example, influences creatine kinase, which is the enzyme involved in breaking down phosphocreatine or that creatine energy system. And so, yeah, it could also change throughout the menstrual cycle as well. But yeah, there's lots of questions that are definitely being explored with regards to creatine in females.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep our eyes open and stay tuned on that one. I did a study with a team, participated in a study on creatine supplementation in juvenile dermatomyositis. So it's a muscle inflammatory disease at sick kids when I was there. I did the MRI studies because we could look at creatine in the muscle tissue using MRI, which was really cool, phosphocreatine actually. And we found that there was an impact of creatine supplementation on inflammation. But that was just in that one group, juvenile dermatomyositis, not the general population. Do you have any thoughts on creatine for inflammation? And is there any data around that?
Yeah, so there is some evidence that creatine works in a variety of different ways, and yeah, one of them is by reducing inflammation as well. I'm more familiar with kind of the endurance or the exercise studies, but there is one where they did a 30-kilometer run, for example. And we know that if you go for that long of a run, it induces some muscle damage and an increase in inflammation. But those taking creatine supplementation had a reduction in some of the inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein or TNF alpha. So yeah, there is some evidence that creatine can actually reduce the inflammatory response as well. So pretty cool that you showed it in that in those children as well in that particular situation. But yeah, there's also evidence in even healthy individuals if they're just performing kind of intense exercise as well.
Got it. What are some myths that you'd love to dispel about creatine? Like, what if people heard that we need to just like clear up and just deal with here and now?
There's too many to speak of, but no, probably. Well, the first one I mentioned was that creatine's not a steroid, so that's really important for people to understand. The second one is that creatine causes hair loss. So that's another thing that people commonly say with regards to creatine supplementation. It was because of a study in 2009 where it was in rugby players, but they showed an increased conversion of testosterone to dihydrotestosterone or DHT. And DHT has been linked to male pattern baldness. And so because DHT was elevated in the creatine group, people are like, don't take creatine because it's going to cause hair loss. So I collaborated with this individual, Grant Tinsley, and some researchers from Iran. And we actually worked with a doctor that actually looked at hair follicle health. And we gave creatine 5 grams per day for 3 months or 12 weeks. And we looked at some of the changes in hair quality or hair health, and there was absolutely no impact of creatine on these direct measures of hair health. So hopefully we've dispelled the myth that creatine actually causes hair loss. But unfortunately, myself, I'm bald. I think it's mainly due to academia and just general stressors in life. But my good friends and colleagues, Phil Chillibeck, Dr. Darren Candow, Jose Antonio, Grant Tinsley, Guillermo Escalante, we have not a single strand of hair on our head. So, yeah, we're not the best, individuals to suggest that creatine does not cause hair loss.
Well, I'm rapidly joining you as well. So apparently, having teenagers causes hair loss rapidly as well. Who knew? But carrying on, what about? I know that there's been some discussion about creatine and kidney function. Anything to speak about with regards to that?
Yeah, for sure. So, creatine is non-enzymatically degraded or broken down into creatinine. So it's a byproduct of creatine metabolism. And that's a normal process. That's why we need to kind of ingest a little bit of creatine each day. And we rely on our body to endogenously synthesize creatine each day as well to try to maintain those creatine stores. But yeah, so in a normal situation, your kidneys are going to filter that creatinine. But if they're not filtering that molecule properly, then it can start to rise in your bloodstream. And so this is quite commonly used in a doctor's office. If you walk into a doctor's office, they're concerned about your kidney function. They're going to measure your creatinine levels in your blood. And if it's starting to rise, they're going to say, hold on for a minute, something's wrong. And it's essentially a red flag. But the thing is, if you're taking a creatine supplement, you're going to have more creatine in your body, and you're also going to raise your creatinine levels as well. So just because you have more creatine, it's not because of your kidney function or dysfunction. And so I think it's misinterpreted quite commonly that, yeah, basically that your kidneys are falling apart because you're on a creatine supplement and that creatinine value is starting to rise. I actually suggest to measure other things if you're taking a creatine supplement. So there's other markers that are also good indicators of kidney function that aren't influenced by creatine supplementation, such as cystatin C. Or if you really want to measure creatinine, what you need to do is measure both in the blood and the urine to see how you're actually clearing that creatinine. And that gives you a really good indication of your kidney function as well. So a couple of different ways. It's a little bit more challenging, perhaps, for the medical doctors, but yeah, it's important if you're trying to take this creatine supplement.
Got it. Let's talk about if you have been listening to this podcast. If you have been, let's say you're creatine curious, you'd like to get started, you want to give this a shot. First of all, do you think that this is safe? Do you think this is something that most people can reasonably add to their routines? Do you generally recommend that this is something that we should all try?
So yeah, it's very safe. There's actually a recent review that evaluated 685 randomized controlled trials, and they concluded that there is no increase in the frequency or prevalence of any side effect compared to placebo. So it's definitely one of the safest supplements that you can take. There's quite a few considerations though. The form of creatine, I suggest just getting creatine monohydrate. It's the most studied. So actually, in those 685 randomized controlled trials, 95% of them were done on creatine monohydrate. So if you walk into a supplement store, they might try to sell you on, I don't know, creatine HCl or buffered forms of creatine, but those are much less studied and they're not any more effective than creatine monohydrate is from a performance standpoint. So yeah, my recommendation is just at the moment, stick to creatine monohydrate. The other recommendation is just to stay in the recommended doses. So we know is taken as little as 3 grams a day, but most people take about 5 grams per day. Is an effective strategy. There are a few case studies that are published where people have tried mega dosing of like 200 plus grams of creatine per day. And of course, they had some health concerns after that as well. So just take a lower dose, or yeah, just take about 5 grams per day, and yeah, you're gonna be healthier. You're gonna saturate your muscles with that energy, and yeah, nothing bad's gonna happen to you.
Right on. And if you wanted to take it before workout, after workout, time of day, does any of that matter?
That's a great question as well. So there was actually a pretty cool study that did unilateral cycling. So basically, they just cycled with one leg at a time, and what they found was that the leg that exercised was able to take up the creatine a little bit better into the muscle compared to the non-exercise leg. So I do suggest to take it close to your exercise. But we also did studies looking at before versus after exercise to see which one was better, and there was no difference. Yeah, I think at the end of that study, we're in science, we're always excited when we get statistical differences, but we found no difference in that study. And I was like, no. But then when I thought about it, it's actually a good thing because it falls down to the individual's preference now. You can take it
Right.
before or after, it doesn't really matter. And we've also done studies looking at creatine during training as well. So they just took a little sip of creatine after each set, and it was also effective as well. And I would like to also mention that we also did a review of looking at creatine supplementation just on exercise days. So they were only taking the supplement 3 times a week, and it was also effective as well. So, yeah, over the long term, you don't even have to take it daily from a muscle perspective. Maybe for the brain, we don't know the best dose and the best kind of way to do that. Maybe you have to take it daily. But from a muscle perspective, even just taking it on exercise days, either before or after, is an effective strategy.